I'm going to make an argument in this video that's going to annoy two completely different groups of people. The AI is the end of human thought. Crowd is going to think I'm too soft on it. The this is just moral panic. People said the same thing about calculators. Crowd is going to think I'm being dramatic. Honestly, if you don't end up a little annoyed by the end of this, I probably didn't do my job. Stick around, I think this one's worth the argument. Quick test before we start. Don't touch your phone. Try to recall the phone number of the first house you ever lived in. If you're old enough, that number is probably still sitting in your head, untouched for decades. The same way a song from when you were 16 comes back, word for word, the second it starts playing. You learned it once. You never had to learn it again. It just stayed there. Now, think about the last phone number you actually learned by heart. Not your own or your partner's. Can you even name one? That gap says nothing about your memory getting worse with age. It says everything about a tool that got so good at remembering for you that your brain simply stopped bothering to try. And that's the small, harmless version of something much bigger now happening to the way we think, not just what we remember. We're living inside the most powerful thinking machines humanity has ever built. AI can write your essay, debug your code, plan your vacation, and argue both sides of a debate better than most people manage on a good day. We have more knowledge sitting in our pockets than any generation in history has ever had access to. So why does it feel like something's slipping? Long before ChatGPT existed, psychologists already had a name for what just happened with that phone number. They call it the Google effect. In 2011, researchers ran a simple experiment. People typed a bunch of trivia facts into a computer. Half were told the file would be saved. Half were told it would get deleted. The people who believed their answers were safely stored remembered way less of the actual information, even though every single person had typed out the exact same facts with the exact same focus. Here's the thing though, your brain didn't glitch in that experiment. It made a calculated bet. If the information lives somewhere else and you know exactly where to grab it again, why waste the storage space? That's not a bug in how your mind works. It's a feature. Humans have been offloading memory for thousands of years, onto cave walls, onto books, onto your uncle who somehow remembers everyone's birthday. Civilization turned out fine. So here's where it gets different. A book never had an opinion. A notebook never finished your sentence for you. AI does something none of those older tools could ever do. It doesn't just hold the memory for you anymore. It does the thinking too. It writes the essay, it builds the argument, it hands you the conclusion before you've spent a single uncomfortable second actually wrestling with the problem, which leaves an awkward question sitting in the room. If the tool remembers for you, and now it thinks for you too, what's actually left for your own mind to do? Here's a story most people have never heard, and I think it's one of the wildest things in the history of philosophy. In 1882, Friedrich Nietzsche was going blind. Writing by hand had become physically painful for him to the point where he was close to giving up writing altogether. So he bought one of the very first typewriters ever made, a strange ball-shaped machine, and taught himself to type without looking at the keys. And then something happened that even Nietzsche noticed. A friend of his, a composer, read his new work and told him his writing style had changed. It had gotten tighter, sharper, more like punches than paragraphs. Nietzsche wrote back and basically agreed with him. He said, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly, that his writing tools were now taking part in shaping his actual thoughts. Sit with that for a second. One of history's most original thinkers looked at a machine and admitted, "This thing isn't just helping me get my ideas onto paper, it's changing what the ideas are." That's not some fringe theory either. There's an entire, very real branch of philosophy built around this exact question. In 1998, Philosophers Andy Clark and David Chalmers published a thought experiment that's still argued about in philosophy departments today. They imagined a man named Otto who has memory loss, so he carries a notebook everywhere and writes down everything important. When Otto needs to remember an address, he doesn't search his memory, he flips open the notebook. Clark and Chalmers' argument is that the notebook isn't just a tool sitting outside Otto's mind. Functionally, it's doing the exact same job your memory does for you. So in every way that matters, they argued, the notebook has become part of Otto's mind. Now replace the notebook with the phone in your pocket. If a paper notebook could count as part of someone's mind back in 1998, what do you call a device that doesn't just store your memories but reasons, drafts, and argues for you? This isn't a new fear, by the way. Centuries earlier, Plato wrote about his teacher Socrates, who was actually suspicious of writing itself, the very technology Nietzsche later used to change his own mind. Socrates worried that once people could write things down, they'd stop holding knowledge inside themselves and start depending entirely on the page. In plain terms, he thought we'd outsource our memory to ink, the same way we now outsource our memory to apps, and that we'd be worse thinkers for it. History sort of proved Socrates wrong about writing. Writing made humanity smarter, not dumber, so you'd think this fear is just the same old panic on repeat. Except every now and then, a tool doesn't just help with the hard part of thinking, it removes the hard part entirely. And the hard part disappearing quietly is exactly how a mental muscle starts to waste away. Here's the part that should genuinely bother you. No app, no platform, no algorithm makes more money when you think slowly and for yourself. Independent thought takes time. It creates friction, and friction is the natural enemy of every single number a tech company's investors care about. This isn't some shadowy conspiracy theory either. It's simpler than that and honestly more believable. A search engine wants you to get an answer and keep scrolling. A social feed wants your eyes glued to it. An AI tool, even one built by people with genuinely good intentions, is tuned to shrink your effort, because less effort looks like better design on every dashboard the people funding it actually care about. Nobody sat in a boardroom and decided to make humanity worse at thinking. That's not how it happens. It happens through 1,000 small, individually reasonable decisions that each shave off one more piece of friction, until you've quietly handed over more of your thinking than you ever consciously agreed to. And the people who could explain this to you most clearly are usually the ones who already left. Tristan Harris spent years inside Google as a design ethicist, literally paid to study how to hold your attention before walking away and spending the rest of his career publicly warning that the entire tech industry is built on what he calls a race to the bottom of the brainstem. He wasn't fired for saying that. He had to leave first to even be allowed to say it loudly. Sit with that for a second. The honesty showed up exactly when the paycheck stopped. Real quick before we move on, be honest with yourself for a second. Has there been a moment this week where you reached for an answer instead of actually sitting with the question first? Don't answer in your head. Actually notice it. We're coming back to this. You don't have to take any of this on faith anymore. There's actual research starting to catch up, and some of it is more striking than you'd expect. In June 2025, MIT's Media Lab ran an experiment where people wrote essays under 3 conditions, using ChatGPT, using a regular search engine, or using nothing but their own brain. Researchers hooked everyone up to EEG sensors, basically a cap that reads your brain's electrical activity, to track how engaged each group's brain actually was while writing. The brain-only group lit up the most, strongest activity in the regions tied to memory and creative thinking, and they reported feeling the most pride and ownership over what they'd written. The ChatGPT group barely registered on the same scale. Their essays were also strangely similar to each other, like everyone had been handed the same set of ideas, and afterward, a lot of them couldn't even accurately quote back the work they'd just submitted under their own name. Then the researchers flipped it. They took people from the ChatGPT group and made them write without the tool. They took the brain-only group and gave them ChatGPT for the first time. The people who struggled first and got help second stayed sharper. The people who got help first and never struggled at all simply never built the muscle to begin with. I want to be straight with you here, because half-truths dressed up as settled science is exactly the kind of thing this video is arguing against. This study hasn't finished full peer review yet, which is basically the scientific community's quality check before something becomes accepted fact. The group studied was also fairly small, 54 people, so treat this as a strong early signal, not a verdict carved in stone. But it lines up with something researchers have tracked for years in a completely different area, the use of GPS. Studies on habitual GPS reliance, including work out of McGill University, have found weaker activity in the hippocampus, your brain's internal mapmaker, in people who lean hard on turn-by-turn directions compared to people who still actually pay attention to where they're going. If you remember folding an actual paper map on the dashboard, or pulling into a gas station to ask a total stranger which way to go, you already know this in your gut. You built a relationship with the road that someone who's never once had to find their own way simply never had the chance to build. Okay, but didn't we say this about calculators too? Fair question, and I'd be a hypocrite making a video about thinking for yourself if I didn't actually wrestle with it. In the 70s and 80s, teachers genuinely worried calculators would rot kids' ability to do math. Some still think it did. But here's the honest answer. Humanity didn't get dumber when calculators showed up. We just stopped spending our limited mental energy on long division, and spent it on things long division was never going to help us with anyway, like actually understanding what the numbers meant. So if I told you AI is the new calculator and you have nothing to worry about, that would be a comfortable place to end this video, and it would also be a little dishonest. Here's the real difference. A calculator only ever did one job, arithmetic, and it never pretended to do anything else. It didn't write your conclusion, and it didn't decide what your essay should argue. AI doesn't replace one narrow skill, it sits in for the entire act of thinking itself, from the first idea to the final sentence if you let it. That's not a difference in degree, that's a difference in kind. Now let's be fully fair to the other side of this too, because a one-sided argument isn't a convincing one, it's just a sermon. Human intelligence isn't one number on a scoreboard. In plenty of ways, we're sharper than past generations ever were. We process visual information faster. We juggle more digital inputs at once than our grandparents could have imagined possible. Researcher James Flynn spent decades documenting a real, measurable rise in IQ scores across the 20th century, a trend now called the Flynn effect, mostly because modern life simply demands more abstract reasoning than farm life ever did. So no, humanity is not uniformly getting dumber. That headline is built for outrage, not honesty, and you deserve better than outrage. Here's the sharper, more honest version. We're not losing raw intelligence. We're losing the specific, practiced muscle underneath it. The discipline to sit inside a hard problem before reaching for the exit. Some researchers call this executive function, which is just a fancy way of saying your brain's command center for focus and self-control. Think of it less like horsepower and more like a gym membership. You don't lose the muscle because something broke. You lose it because you stopped showing up. So if this video's title promised you dumber, here's the honest version of that claim. We're getting dumber in one very specific, very real, very measurable way. And it's not on an IQ test. In the daily discipline that test was never built to capture, the ability to sit with a hard question long enough for your own answer to actually show up. So, where does that leave you? Probably a little exposed, and that's fair. Most of us have caught ourselves reaching for an AI answer before genuinely trying to work through something ourselves, and felt that small, hollow twinge afterward, like we skipped a step we never actually agreed to skip. That twinge isn't weakness. Noticing it puts you ahead of most of this debate online where the whole thing gets flattened into AI is amazing versus AI is evil. Neither side is the real issue. The real issue is whether you're the one choosing the convenience or the convenience has quietly started choosing for you. I'm not going to tell you to delete your apps. That's not realistic. And frankly, these tools are extraordinary when you actually choose to use them instead of defaulting to them. So here are 2 small things worth trying. Not as guilt trips, just as reps for a muscle worth keeping. First, struggle before you search. Before opening an AI tool for anything you genuinely care about getting right, give yourself 2 honest minutes to try it on your own first. Write a rough draft, attempt the math, try to remember the name before looking it up. You can absolutely use the tool right afterward. The MIT data suggests that the order matters more than whether you use the tool at all. Second, pick one small low-stakes piece of your day and deliberately do it the old way. Mental math at checkout instead of the calculator app. A drive to a familiar place with the directions turned off. A phone number recalled instead of tapped. If you grew up doing all of this automatically, you already know exactly what that feeling of relying on your own head is supposed to feel like. You're not learning something new, you're just refusing to let something old quietly disappear. Because here's the truth underneath everything we've covered today. No platform, no algorithm, no company is ever going to protect your attention or your ability to think hard for you. They were never built to. That job, uncomfortable as it is, still belongs entirely to you. The same way it belonged to Otto and his notebook, the same way it belonged to Nietzsche and his typewriter. The tool was never the problem. The question was always whether you stayed the one in charge of it. So, smarter or dumber, genuinely both, happening at the same time in different parts of the mind. We're gaining speed and losing depth. We're gaining access and losing the struggle that used to build real understanding. And the people building these systems have very little reason to slow down and ask whether that trade is actually good for us, because the trade is extraordinarily good for them. That doesn't make AI the villain of this story. If there's a villain here, it's the quiet assumption that easier always means better. The idea that friction is a bug to be engineered away instead of a process that might genuinely be building something in you. That assumption isn't coming from one evil company. It's baked into the incentives of an entire industry, and most people inside it honestly don't see it, because seeing it clearly would mean questioning the thing currently paying their salary. Now, here I'll need to be honest with you, because it would be a little ironic not to be. I used AI while researching parts of this video to pull sources faster and check facts. I'm not going to pretend otherwise, especially in a video about being honest about how we use these tools. The difference is I read the studies myself, argued with the conclusions, and decided what I actually believe before any of it made it onto this page. That's the whole argument of this video, really. Use the tool. Just don't let it skip the part where you actually think. You don't have to accept any of this trade blindly. You get to decide where the line sits, when to let the tool carry the weight, and when to carry it yourself even when it's slower. So here's my real question for you, and I actually want the answer. Drop it in the comments. What's one thing you used to do entirely from memory? No notebook, no app, no assistant, that you've completely handed over now? And be honest with yourself. Do you actually miss having that skill, or did you never really need it? If this video put words to something you've already started noticing in yourself, send it to someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of thinking. And let's keep this conversation going, because the moment we stop questioning how these tools are shaping us is the exact moment they start shaping us the most.